بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد خاتم الأنبياء المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to lesson 12 of our lessons on successful Islamic marriage, getting married in a manner that will earn us the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And lesson 12 has two parts. In the first part, we're going to be looking at closing counsels from major living scholars that remind us of key lessons that we should have learned from this course. And then in the second part of the course, we're going to take a brief recap of the 11 previous lessons. So looking at closing counsels from major scholars, the first of the scholars is Imam Zayd Shakir. And in an important article on living the virtues of our religion, Imam Zayd mentions this very important point, that marriage is not a playground where the ego thoughtlessly pursues its vanities. Right? It is an institution that helps a man and a woman pursue the purpose of their creation, namely to glorify and worship Allah and to work to make the world a better place for those we share it with and those we leave it to. So, in these deceptively clear words, Imam Zayd makes a number of very, very important points. Firstly, that marriage tests your ego, right? Tests your nafs. And in order to succeed in marriage and in order to be a successful believer with your Lord, you need to be able to make your ego submit to prophetic teachings in order to attain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And how is that manifest in marriage? By upholding good character, right? As we defined, right? And marriage is meant to facilitate for us to glorify and worship Allah, to earn His pleasure, and also to be part of spreading the good in society, right? Of which marriage is a foundational institution. And then Imam Zayd closes by reminding us of how this relates to the divine call. He says this role is beautifully captured in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the believing men and women are supporting friends of each other. They enjoin good, forbid wrong, establish regular prayer, pay the poor due, and they obey Allah and His Messenger. These expect Allah's mercy, right? And the verse makes that an exclusive matter, that it is these people, i.e. and these alone, that are truly worthy of expecting Allah's mercy. Surely Allah is mighty and wise, right? So this is the paradigm of the marital relationship, right? المؤمنين والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض. They are awliya, they're supporting friends of each other, right? And a wali is someone who guards the interests of another and takes care of them and who assists and supports them, right? And this is the word used for the relationship between men and women, right? So this is the spirit in which one upholds a marriage, right? There's this Allah centricity. And then the second part of what we wanted to quote from Imam Zayd was Imam Zayd has these seminars he has conducted a number of times on marriage. And these are 7 lessons on that we need to keep in mind with respect to having a successful marriage. The first is deepen trust, right? That it is critical for each spouse to trust one another, right? And that requires a number of things, right? It requires being true, being honest to one another, right? Being honest to one another, to give each other the benefit of the doubt, right? To have a good opinion of the other, right? And also not to pry excessively into their affairs, right? And and if one is uncomfortable about something regarding the other, to pursue it in a manner that wouldn't corrode this trust, right? And to be honest with one another, right? Instead of suppressing one's um, worries, one's dislike. There's something you don't like about your spouse. Deal with it in a way that would deepen trust within you and not erode um, this um, this critical element of the relationship. That relates to lesson number, the second point, which is communicate, right? Know how to talk to one another, right? Say the good or remain silent, um, which is the prophetic counsel. Whoever believes in Allah in the last day should say the good or remain silent. And in marriage, everything that preserves the interest, short and long term, of the marriage is from saying the good, right? And be a keen listener, right? Your spouse should be comfortable telling you about their misgivings, their failings, their weakness, right? Without you flailing at them and getting angry, etc. Right? So communication is both be, being expressive yourself, but also listen to your spouse, right? And don't hasten to judgment. You should, a sign that you have a good relationship is that your spouse can tell you about things they've done wrong, mistakes, etc., and you're able to listen, and then you respond, of course, in accordance to what is in the best interest of your relationship, and in a manner that safeguards the rights and interests of all involved. The third, Imam Zayd expresses an interesting way. He calls it fight fair, right? Fighting fair means if you disagree, don't disagree through anger, through accusation, through insult, through harshness. Rather, control your anger, and instead of disputing, disagree, but through discussion, right? And we talked about this in lesson 11. Instead of focusing on what the other person did wrong, focus on what can be corrected moving forward, right? Together, right? Which may entail deferring the discussion till you or the other or your spouse are in a better emotional state. The fourth is be money smart. A lot of problems in marriage occur due to financial disagreements, to non-definition of ownership, etc. The fifth, diffuse power struggles. Right? Don't try to impose yourself on your spouse, but rather, Imam Zayd says, level the playing field with mercy. Right? Mercy. Don't try to impose yourself on your spouse and say, well, I'm trying to get your way, right? Or to prove them wrong, right? But be an embodiment of mercy. What's mercy? Mercy is to care for another and to do good to another. The sixth is very, it says, make love, not war, right? Be a garment for one another. And love, here is both, emotional love for the other and also physical love for the other, right? Be garments emotionally for one another, so you give each other that support, but also be proactive in fulfilling the physical needs of your spouse, right? And they shouldn't have to ask, right? You should be, both as a husband or as a wife, right? You should be proactive in seeking to fulfill the physical needs of your spouse, as well as the emotional needs of your spouse. Very often one spouse will say some loving words, and the other person says, well, give me a minute. No, hasten, right? Hasten to fulfill both the emotional needs of your spouse, right? Even if you're busy, right? Very important, because when someone is spurned, whether emotionally or physically, the hurt is very deep. It may not be conscious hurt, but it negatively impacts on the relationship, right? And then the seventh is team up, right? Work together, right? Work together. Discuss how you together can work at your common goals, right? Instead of saying, okay, well, this is what I want to do and this is what you want to do. How do we compromise? Rather look at having shared goals, right? Having shared dreams, shared aspirations, but which are are necessarily not imposed aspirations, but aspirations that are put to, that are shared, right? That both parties have come to accept and want. So these are some of the counsels that we are taking from Imam Zayd Shakir. And now one of the great scholars from the Muslim heartland, many consider him one of the greatest Muslim philosophers of the last few hundred years, Sayyid Naqib al-Attas of Malaysia. He has a number of very important works, amongst them Islam and Secularism, and this work called A Prolegomena to the Metaphysics of Islam. He mentions that Islam revolves around adab, right? Adab, which is the right way of doing things, and that much of the crisis of Muslims in our in our times is the decline and loss of adab. So who is a person of adab? He gives a very useful definition, right? That a person of adab is someone who is sincerely conscious of their responsibility towards God, who understands and fulfills their obligations to themselves and others with justice, and who consistently strives to improve every aspect of themselves towards perfection as a person of adab, right? So a person of adab is sincerely conscious of their responsibility towards Allah, right? They're directed towards God. Their primary concern is seeking the pleasure of Allah. How is that manifest? For having the knowledge that enables them to fulfill their obligations, firstly to themselves by fulfilling the rights of Allah, and to others by fulfilling the rights of others, right? And with this key Islamic virtue of justice, adl, right? And what is justice? Justice is giving everyone their due, giving everyone and everything their due. A person of adab, right, of proper manners, of propriety, is someone who gives everyone their due. Everyone and everything and every circumstance, its due, right? And this is why a person of adab is someone who is a person of justice, right? And who's striving to always improve towards perfection, towards ihsan, towards excellence, right? And kamal, right? And perfection, right? Why? Because they want to be beloved to God, right? So this is adab is doing things in the right way, is striving to be beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we strive to manifest that in our marriage and our dealings with others, right? And this is why upholding outward decorum is so significant in maintaining inward virtue, right? So conduct yourself with adab in your relationship, right? Uphold dignified conduct, uphold respect of your spouse, uphold restraint and diffidence, right? And all the high virtues, right? So this is something to reflect upon. The third is the advice of our beloved Habib Omar bin Hafid, right? Who gave a beautiful counsel in Malaysia to a group about weddings, right? He said that weddings in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and particularly if you look at the weddings of that the Prophet ﷺ himself presided over, the weddings, his own marriages and the marriages of his daughters, they had certain qualities. What are they? That these weddings did not cause heedlessness to the attendees. These weddings were moderate, right? Though they're filled with beauty, right? Because they were expressions of love, expressions of care, expressions of rejoicing, right? But with moderation. He says wedding preparations were kept simple, right? Um, the highlight of the events was spiritual rejoicing. And dua was made, seeking goodness for the newly married couple, good in their relationship, good in their lives, good in their journey to Allah, right? And he says, on the contrary, in our times, wedding ceremonies have become rather too extravagant. People no longer limit themselves to what is permissible, right? And there's much that is haram, unfortunately common in weddings, right? God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us intellects, aql, by which, and what is the intellect? The intellect is the instrument of discernment. It enables us to distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad, advantage and disadvantage. Yet people use this instrument, right, the mind, the intellect, to disobey the light of guidance, right, to turn away from their benefit, to turn away from advantage, to turn away from good, right? And so, for example, the Prophet ﷺ encouraged announcing the marriage by the playing of the daf, or permissible drums. And Habib Omar says there are permissible musical instruments, yet people still opt for the haram, right? And likewise, the Prophet ﷺ called us to moderation, but Habib Omar says Muslims have the tendency to go overboard in organizing a wedding, right? For example, and going beyond limits. So, for example, emulating reprehensible customs of other peoples when it comes to free mingling between men and women, right? Or immodesty, right? The bride kissing her husband's hand openly in public, things that are not consonant with Islamic values. So some of these matters may not be absolute. And he says that if you turn away from prophetic norms, right, and emulate practices that are at variance with prophetic guidance, then where would the barakah be in a wedding? He says rather, right, a heart that receives light, a heart that seeks to be in the gathering of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, will shun those wedding customs and habits that are far from prophetic teachings, far from the Sharia, right? Because whoever, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever imitates a people will be of them, So we strive to emulate the prophetic example, right? That beautiful simplicity, right? In which there is rejoicing, which there's bringing people together, there is happiness, there is celebration, yet in a manner that is completely pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we do things in accordance with we strive to emulate, not just the form, but the form and the spirit of, the prophetic practices and the practices of the righteous. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever imitates a people will be of them. Stay away from the way of people of dunya, people of disobedience, people of turning away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Celebrate, but celebrate in a manner that will earn those getting married blessing and benefit, and be an expression of their journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Habib Omar says, therefore think, who is it that you wish to follow, right? And then he also counsels that that one should invite scholars and the poor and the needy, right? And purify your wedding from all that is prohibited. Make remembrance of Allah in the event. Make it a celebration that is worldly and that is spiritual, right? And then he says the light of Allah will shine upon the gathering and the marriage. So the key counsels here are remembering the prophetic way of moderation and simplicity, right? And avoiding the haram, and being careful particularly about music at weddings, right? That stick to what is permissible, right? Avoid impermissible intermingling at weddings. Like, seek barakah in the wedding. Make the wedding a celebration, a rejoicing, a means of expressing happiness and joy and bringing people together, both family and friends and those who whose benefit is sought, right? The scholars, the poor and needy, people. For example, there's some new Muslims that are still not connected with the community. Bring people together, because these are means of barakah, right? So there's much to reflect on from the noble words here of Habib Omar. The fourth counsel is from our dear Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, and he talks about what is real love, right? And this is important to understand, because there's a lot of misunderstanding of love, right, in our times, because of the very sort of carnal view of love, right? That love is, you find someone attractive, so you love them, right? And it really is nothing much more than a physical attraction or just an emotional whim, right? Right? If a little deeper, right? So you find someone beautiful, so you love them. You like some little aspect of how they are, so you think you love them, but it's just either the love of lust or just whimsical love, right? But what is true love? So he gives us, and he's talking here about true worldly love, right? Because there's a higher aspect of love of God, right? But true love between individuals, he says, true love, not the bestial love of lust, and he says quote unquote love, is what is love, right? Love is the desire to give pleasure to the other as well as to receive it, right? Is that keen urge, right, to give pleasure, to make another happy, and to seek happiness from them, right? And the former being generally the stronger desire, the desire to give pleasure, to give happiness, to give joy to another, right? So this is what love is. But love is this precious emotion, right? This precious emotion. So he says, but acts of betrayal can destroy love. Acts of betrayal, right? Betraying someone emotionally or physical infidelity can destroy love. It is chastity, which is this Islamic virtue of iffa, that enables one to ethically commit to another without the destructive element of betrayal, right? And that's why we have the limits of gender interaction, and also the underlying virtues of modesty, haya, and iffa, dignified restraint, chastity. These enable one to commit to another without falling into things that betray the preciousness of that love, upon which the marriage relationship revolves. Why? Because marriage, what does it revolve around? It revolves around love and mercy, right? So this is a reminder, and it's also a call to think about what are the true realities of love. What does it mean to love another, right? And then the fifth counsel is just in terms of choosing a spouse, right? From Ustada Hidayah Hartford, who says that you should be happy with a prospective spouse as he or she is, yeah? Rather than anticipating an array of future improvements. After marriage, some changes naturally take place, though they may be different from what you expect or want. And then she says, long-term traits seldom change much, unless a person is fighting them, and even then it takes time. For example, if you're lazy before marriage, you'll probably remain lazy unless you're actively trying to change. Virtually any habit can be broken if the will exists. However, going into a marriage, depending on this transformation, is unrealistic, risky, and ill-advised. And this actually was highlighted today. I got this email. This brother says, I'm trying to be a student of knowledge and to be serious about my deen, and I want, and he's talking about marriage, and he's saying that I want to, marry this the sister who, she prays most of the time, and she doesn't wear hijab, and she does this and does that, all these things that. So the question is, what are you looking for in life? What are you looking for in life? Right? And then, if that's what you're looking for, then marry someone who is as you want to be, right? Who is as you want to be, right? Um, and if you reflect on that, you'll realize that, and don't just say, well, I'm not that good either, right? Because if you're trying to improve, marry someone who will assist you in improving in your deen, right? Don't have wishful thinking that, well, they'll change. Rather, you should be hoping that you will change and that your spouse will be that aid and support in journeying in life towards your eternal good. Right? So these are some counsels that we wanted to share. The second part of the lesson is a brief review of the course lessons. Right? And this is a brief review. We'll be putting some points from each of the lessons, but we won't be expanding on them because we've covered these. But there's some, it's reminders are very important, right? In lesson 1, we looked very simply at marrying for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That the wisdom of marriage is that, and why it's half of deen, is because it tests the key quality that makes you beloved to Allah, which is sincerity. That you are seeking, you are truly seeking the pleasure of Allah in your actions and in your responses to what happens to you and around you in life. And how is that tested? It is tested through having to uphold good character. Right? Through having to uphold good character. And this is why marriage is half the deen. Right? And this is really, if the one lesson you get from the whole course is وَخَالِقِ النَّاسَ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. Deal with people on the basis of good character. Right? The believers most perfect in faith are those best in character, and the best of you are those best to their spouses. Then in lesson 2, we looked at intentions in marriage, right? Have high intentions in marriage. Gather your resolve when it comes to why you're marrying, or even why you're married, right? Remind yourself of that, and make a high intention before you marry, and renew your intentions. Right? Both the ultimate intent, which is seeking the pleasure of Allah, and all the derivative intentions. And here we shared with you this beautiful dua of intentions in marriage by Sheikh Abu Bakr Sakran, which is very powerful. But it can even help to write it out yourself, right? What is your intention in marrying, right? And to try to elevate your intent, and then to live up to it. And we also looked at key considerations in marriage, that it is not only who you marry that is important, right? But firstly is the person marrying. Where are you at with respect to preparedness and readiness for marriage, awareness of what successful marriage takes, awareness of what you're bringing to the marriage. Second is who the person you're marrying, right? And then also how you go about getting married, right? So these are some of the, just an outline of lesson 2. In lesson 3, we looked at the issue of choosing to marry, whom you marry, what you should be looking for, and that we don't just go with mere forms, but look at the reality, right? So when we talk about marrying for someone of deen, what is deen? It's not mere apparent religiosity, nor is it, religion is not summarized in a piece of cloth or in some facial hair. Though outward religiosity, is a means of preserving the meaning of deen, which is sincere concern, right? Because if concern is sincere, then conduct would follow it, right? Because any claim of sincerely seeking the pleasure of Allah while acting in ways displeasing to Allah is questionable, right? But also having self-awareness, right? Don't kid yourself about what your criteria are, right? Be honest, right? Be honest to yourself, right? That what are you seeking, right? And are you deciding on the basis of what is pleasing to Allah, or are you just giving sort of token, um, sort of um, admission, right? That yes, I'm marrying for the sake of Allah, but find me the most beautiful person around, right? So what really was the criteria, right? So be real, right? Be real. Consider carefully what is it that you're seeking in a spouse, because this is going to affect you in the marriage as well, right? That what does your spouse represent in life? Are they just the object of some fleeting infatuation, which which will go very quickly, or is there something deeper that you're seeking with them in your journey to Allah? This powerful hadith, right, that we've touched upon, that this world is a provision, and the best of its provisions is a righteous spouse. Right? And then in lesson 4 we looked at the process of getting married, and one of the key things is take the means. If you're looking to get married, take the means of getting married. The sunnah is that you place your trust in Allah, but you take the means. Right? And this is particularly important for sisters. Many of them, are in situations where, they have high aspiration in terms of who they want to marry, but their parents aren't facilitating those choices, so they remain in a quandary, right? With respect to marriage. So our counsel is take the means, right? Convince your parents about what your criteria are. There's nothing wrong in taking dignified means of looking for a spouse, right? And then if we looked at convincing parents, right? Convincing parents, whether it be at the level of convincing them of the kind of person you want to marry, or convincing them of a particular person that you have in mind or that you want to marry, right? And we looked at the issue that the central right of your parents is that you be good to them, that you be virtuous to them, that you be respectful, kind, caring, polite, right, gentle, that you not argue with them, that you not get angry with them, that you not be harsh to them. But good character, upholding good character, is a means of convincing parents. But at the same time, you take what your parents have to say very seriously. They may have a point. They may well have a point, right, in terms of concerns about whom to marry, right? And avoid fatalism, right? Don't just sit there and say, well, no one's going to marry me, right? Take the means and have trust in Allah. The single greatest means of success is having absolute confidence in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. الثقة بالله. Right? The Prophet ﷺ said, "Udu Allah wa antum muqinuna bil ijaba." Call upon Allah with complete certitude of regarding His response. Right? And then in lesson 5 we look at the engagement, right? And the fact that this is a time where one needs to be cautious, because you're not married yet. You're still legally strangers. And either party can just walk away from the engagement. You can't make an engagement without the resolve that that you want to marry the person in question. But it is merely a promise to marry, right? Either party could back out of it. So be very so this requires caution and restraint regarding the relationship. And if you are sure that this is the person you want to marry, normally it's best to hasten the nikah, to hasten the marriage. Right? Though in some circumstances there's benefits in delaying the nikah, but usually if the people are set on marrying, it's best to to have the nikah, and then the wedding itself and living together could be delayed till later, right? In lesson 6 we looked at the marriage ceremonies, and the fact that we should strive to have blessed celebration. We've touched upon this in what we looked at from Habib Ammar, so we won't expand on that too much. It's very important to avoid waste, extravagance, and the haram, because how can you seek divine pleasure, divine facilitation, divine assistance? How can you seek barakah in your blessing in your marriage by doing things that are displeasing to the one who places blessing in the marriage, right? So be careful, right? But no one is suggesting to have somber, boring weddings, right? Celebrate, right? It's a prophetic command to celebrate weddings, but with blessed celebration. In the seventh lesson, right? In lesson 8, we look at keys to successful marriage, right? Of upholding good character and having love and mercy in the marriage. And we looked at how good character is manifest, right? Those 5 keys that you should, of fulfilling the rights of the other, of responding to the, of not hurting and harming others, of being positive and cheerful, of recognizing the good of others and responding to it with the good, and the 5th being not responding to the bad of others with anything but the good, right? And we looked at key underlying values, right, of service, respect, patience, empathy, calm, forbearance, and being Allah-centric, right? We skipped over lesson 7. Lesson 7, we looked at the marriage contract, right, and how important it is to have a proper marriage contract. And in the marriage contract, we talked about specifying the conditional right of divorce, and also having, along with the marriage contract, a marriage agreement in which you agree to the key issues that are important to either party, right? And especially in our times when expectations are in flux, this is very important. And we talked about a whole number of things that one should consider specifying. These are things that should be upheld in a marriage anyways, but having an agreement beforehand clarifies expectations and reduces the risk of dispute. Right? And then lesson 9, we look at the issue of rights and the context of rights and the higher aim of marriage, right? That the higher aim of the deen, which is the preservation of religion, and how rights preserve the interests both of the individuals by securing what is rightfully theirs and avoiding harm, but also they preserve the benefit of the marriage itself, right, by warding off harm, right? And we looked at 6 keys to the fulfillment of rights, and we summarized as being taqwa, God-fearingness, which is avoiding anything that is prohibited by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this in the relationship entails avoiding wronging your spouse, love and mercy, good character, consultation, being easygoing, and being forward-looking. And also, we also reminded that one should not overlook nor underestimate the power of traditional values and the sunnah roles of that the Prophet ﷺ clarified, right, of the man being the head of the family, being the leader of the family, and how having the outward or the outside responsibilities within the family, and of the woman being the being the caretaker, the one who takes care of the house, who takes care of the children, who takes care of the health of the marriage, right? She preserves the good of the marriage, right? And however, we also saw how these are manifest. There's a tremendous divine wisdom in the Sunnah, keeping that open, right? So do review that. In lesson 10, we looked at this critical issue: why problems happen, of the difference between self-concern, right, and self-centeredness, and on the one hand, and true faith, which is manifest in concern for others. None of you believes, said the Prophet ﷺ, until they wish for others as they wish for themselves. Religion is sincere concern, right? Both concern for Allah and for concern for Allah's creation, but concern for Allah's creation is insofar as it's Allah's creation, right? And how is that concern manifest in marriage? It's manifest in that key quality, right, of love and mercy and the upholding of good character, right? And if you can hold fast to these core values, you'll be able to sail through marriage with excellence. And then how do you resolve differences, right? We looked at there's different types of differences, right? And we touched upon a number of them: financial, religious, family, money, and so on. And to be successful in resolving differences, firstly, it helps to define these matters, right? Which is why we contend that having a marriage agreement is very advantageous, right? Where you define how financial matters, how religious disagreements, how family relationships, etc., will be handled, and then to have a process to resolve differences, to agree as a couple, and you maybe even agree in the marriage agreement itself, right? How you will resolve your differences, and we touched upon how to do that, right? And some of the underlying means of doing so: having patience, looking at the bigger picture, not venting, discussing your problems, approaching differences with the attitude of what can we do about it. It's not about you and me, right? It's about we, right? And consulting when confused, or consulting those worthy of consulting. Don't just vent with people, right? One is venting at your spouse, but consulting is when you raise an issue with someone whose opinion you trust, seeking clarification or counsel or guidance from them. And when things become difficult, don't hesitate to seek counseling, right? Don't hesitate to seek counseling, ideally as a couple, but even if one person can help rescue a marriage as well, right? So when things go bad, God forbid, and always be firm on justice, right? Be willing to admit your faults, right? And see the divine wisdom in challenges in marriage. Your husband is not perfect, right? He may fall short. He may be afflicted with some of the fitnas of our age. Your wife is not perfect. She may make mistakes. She may make a grave mistake, right? See the wisdom in that. See the test. See the fact that this may be an opportunity for you to respond in a way that preserves the good for you, for the relationship, and for your spouse, right? Have the virtues of complete trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing the right thing. Right? And even if certain differences or certain errors of your spouse are too much and you want to step away, right? See that this is a test too, that can you seek your rights in a way that is right, with restraint, without wronging the other, right? With grace, in a manner that preserves the good, particularly if you have children, right? So these are some of the lessons that we've looked at. In closing, there's some books that we've recommended previously, but just because there's three books that we particularly recommend. One is Ustad Hidayah Hartford's book on Islamic marriage. The second is Imam Ghazali's work, Proper Conduct of Marriage in Islam, and John Gottman's work, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. Really, these are 3 works that we'd encourage everyone who's getting married to seriously consider. And also, there's a very useful lesson set by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf on marriage, which we would recommend, and also one on rights and responsibilities in marriage by Mufti Muhammad ibn Adam. And those are 2 lesson sets that we would unhesitatingly recommend, inshallah ta'ala. So, marriage is half your deen. It's a means to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever of you has married has completed half their religion, so let them be mindful of Allah, let them have taqwa of Allah regarding the other half. The Prophet ﷺ said, the believers most perfect in faith are those best in character, and the best of you are those best to their spouses. This world is a provision, and the best of its provisions is a righteous spouse. And the righteous spouse here is not just the person you're marrying, but strive to be the best of companions to your spouse. Be the righteous spouse, Right? Uphold virtue. What is righteousness? The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-birru husnul khuluq. Righteousness is good character. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who illuminate our lives, illuminate our inward and outward with the light of prophetic guidance, a light that shines for us the straight path, the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, on which we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the best of supports in our spouses and in our children. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. O Lord, grant us in our spouses and in our offspring a joy for our eyes, and make us the foremost of the people of piety. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا والحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى